Welcome to the live Tuesday call. This is Jeff St Laurent. We get a good crew on there, and always to those people who are coming into the call live, I always appreciate that. And of course, those of you who are listening to the recording, appreciate you guys as well. We had a nice conversation with people that call in live. So if you ever get a chance to call in live, if you're listening to this recording, love to hear you, love to hear your story, and always love to interact with people in my audience. Again, like I do record all these calls and I post them at the end of the week in my university. That's on my website, sellingcoaching.com. So you can always check that out. Got a lot of great resources. We just hit the 100th call last week. So we're moving right on past it. And that's what this is all about, is about consistency in your business. And that's where we go from there. So we got all live Tuesday calls recorded in the university. So go to sellingcoaching.com, check that out. Right on the homepage of sellingcoaching.com, I've got a great resource called the Ultimate Startup Guide for New Coaches. So you definitely deserve to check that out, especially even if you've been doing the business a little while. It's a good listen. It takes a look at our business and the different facets of it that we need in order to really launch a successful long-term coaching business. And I also have a great private Facebook group at the top of my website, sellingcoaching.com. A lot of great interaction that goes in and on there. And then before we get into the topic, I'll say that I am available for one-on-one mentoring. If you're in a position where you're either frustrated and you're like, you don't know what you're doing, or you don't want to get to that point, and you're like, I just want to just move this along as seamlessly as possible. I know I need that guidance. Go to the Work With Me page at sellingcoaching.com. There's a form at the bottom. Fill that out. That's going to come to me. I will call you and I will follow up with you. I always do that within a day easily. And just create a relaxed conversation and kind of see where you're at and seeing if the timing's right for something like some one-on-one mentoring. But either way, my main motivation is to help you move forward and create a successful coaching business as I help coaches transition to a full-time business. Today, our topic is, I just labeled it one-on-one coaching versus group coaching. And it's not like, there's a competition necessarily between the two, but I just kind of want to go over kind of the thought process between the two. And as we start our coaching business off, we look to it and say, well, how are we going to make money? How do we monetize it, in other words? And typically, when we think about what we sell when we're starting off, our only product, so to speak, even though it's a service, but I'll say our only product really is one-on-one coaching. And of course, we could do group coaching. We don't have a book yet, let's say. We don't have a course necessarily. So we're starting off with that. So as we look to that, I want to just talk about kind of like the elements of both and what you need and why, maybe where to start versus the other and where you can go from there. And as a lot of coaches start off, a lot of people are loving groups, and groups been hot as of late, and it's been for a while too, but a lot of people want to do more group coaching, and they also think that, if I do group coaching, I can leverage my income as well, because if I get, many people paying even just a smaller rate, I could actually earn more, let's say, per session or per hour. And so there's different strategies with that. So we'll go into that. And I want to start off with this. The number one objective in our business, and those of you who are students of mine, as you listen to this, right away you should be saying in your head what that is. So as you listen to me more and you become more and more my student, you'll hear some repeat threads through my calls and my teachings, and that's good because there's only so many new things you could talk about, right? So you want some repetition. So as you say this in your head, so the number one activity in our business, I want you to keep this in mind, is building an audience. So whatever we do in terms of activities each and every day, we should be asking ourselves in terms of prioritizing our activities. And I started touching upon those specific activities in the last call, the 100th call. But any of those priority activities should be activities that help us build our audience. Since at the end of the day, if we don't have an audience, there's no way we can actually monetize from that audience, because we don't have anyone to sell anything to, right? So we don't have anything like that. So we need people. And so we need to develop an audience. We need to figure out who our audience is, right? Who do we help? Where are they? And what do we help them with specifically? We need to find out where they are and then create a marketing plan, a marketing structure to get out in front of them and then start to attract them into our audience. And then we need to stay in front of that audience on a weekly basis. Things like our email community, maybe a social media platform like my Facebook group, as I say. the live calls that I do, a weekly event, things like that. We want to set that structure up. Again, those are the things that I help people with in my one-on-one and my group programs as well. So we're staying in front of our audience and nurturing those relationships, so that as we build our audience, at some point we can monetize it. In other words, when they have a need and the timing is right, maybe they consider working with us. Now, in the beginning, and so I say in the beginning, and in the beginning for me, in terms of my recommendations, is I'll say your first, let's just say 2 years, 18 to 24 months really, but the first 2 years of your business is the beginning. And we don't ever stop moving forward after that, but really in order to get some real momentum going, to get enough people in your world, or in other words, in your audience, in your circle, to kind of create some momentum and to kind of create some more consistent income, you're going to need a good 18 to 24 months of consistency. And when I say consistency, it's consistency of marketing yourself, getting your message out there to attract the people. And then it's the 18 to 24 months of staying in front of those people and nurturing them with our email community, weekly events like this, etc. And that's building those relationships. And from that, you'll extract clients or maybe some group things as well. But you need that time frame. So while we're in that first 18 to 24 months, if I were going to make a recommendation in terms of group coaching versus one-on-one coaching, I'd always recommend that you start off with one-on-one. It's the easiest thing for you to do because you don't have to create any program, any more content. Usually the coaches that I work with and speak with initially, one of their biggest concerns, other than figuring out who they help with what specifically, I call it the headline. Other people will call it like a niche as an example. But their biggest concerns is like, well, once there, what do I talk about? Well, what do I say? They don't know. Of course they know. I always tell them, you know, it's in you. It's just going to give yourself the medium to extract it. Because once you get going, I start asking anybody about, what it is that they talk about. And once you get them in a zone, they get in a zone. They know what they're talking about. So, but we want to start getting that out there. But the great part is you don't have to create any content for group coaching or for a course or something like that. It's just, let's start with one-on-one. And the reason I say start with one-on-one, and let me, just before I go into that, say it doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't do group, because you could be listening to someone else being like, oh, don't do one-on-one, do group. I'll give you my reasons why, though. The reason I suggest one-on-one, number one, not necessarily in any order, but I'll just say number one, is because when you get a one-on-one client, you actually get a real payday. Meaning, let's say you charge 9 sessions for $1,500. You get a new client, you just made $1,500. Okay, that's a decent chunk of change. Whereas if you're doing a group initially, the hardest part about doing a group, which is another reason why I recommend waiting a little while to do some groups, because you don't really have many or any people starting off. So how are you going to get a group together when you don't have a group of people to begin with? Right? That's really the biggest reason why I would have you wait to do some group programs or even some courses is because it's hard to get a group together. So the reality is even if you're starting with friends and family and maybe you got some relevant contacts, etc., couple hundred people even, maybe more than that, but the reality to get 3 to 5 people together, it's a lot of work. And those clients of mine that are listening to this call, they're nodding their heads right now, because when we're working in the trenches and I'm helping them, behind the scenes and talking about the real work to be done, there's a lot of work getting a group together. So, and if you don't have a lot of people to pull from, then it's just like, how many times can you go to the same person over and over again before they feel like they're badgered into like they have to do this program or not? And then just making people uncomfortable at that point. So those are some of the main reasons initially you start with one-on-one is number one, you can get, a real payday right away. And it's challenging to get a group together. So with that also being said, the reality is even if you got a small number of people, even if you have a decent number of people, if you got a group together, I'm finding clients of mine it's real work even to get to 5 people, right? So if you get 5 people and you're charging whatever, $100 for a 4-week course, or depending on what you're doing for a group program, especially if it's a smaller course, yeah, you can make $500-$600 or whatever it is, but you're not necessarily getting the big payday. Now, if you're doing a group program where you're doing a 6-week or a 12-week course and it's it's more individualized and you're just doing 5 people and it's $1,500 a head, okay, great. Now you're talking a much bigger payday for yourself, and you don't have to worry about as many people. But also the challenge of getting, even 5 people for group coaching at, let's say, $15 a head for a 12-week program. It's a lot of work to get that many interested people. That's like basically getting 6 one-on-one clients at one time. And I'm just talking from experience. Again, I'm not discouraging you. I'm just setting up the realistic perspective for you, and mainly so that you don't get discouraged. Because as you come into this business, we're so passionate about what we would do. Oftentimes we don't know the realities of what we can and can't do. Not from like, oh, well, you can't do this necessarily, as I'm like holding you back, but more of just like what it really takes to get people into a group. Oftentimes when you see what's out there marketing wise, they're marketing to you. They want you to buy their programs. So they're not saying it's hard and it's slow and it takes a lot of work and it's doing the things that you don't like to do, which is, getting on the phone with people and following up with people and having the sales conversations. I'm the one sitting here telling you, well, that's what it is. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. It's not easy. It's not quick. There's nothing quick about it. But that stuff isn't sexy. That stuff doesn't sell. But I'm not trying to sell you that stuff. I'm trying to sell you, it's like, hey, do the work. You're going to get paid. You get paid really well. And this can explode for you. But start to nurture the relationships. Build your audience first. Start off with that one-on-one and start off with that. Now going into more reasons is that not only is it you're going to get the bigger payday. So then, in other words, if you charge 9 sessions for $1,500 and you get a couple new clients this month, that's $3,000, right? Now, if we're an adult and we have financial responsibilities, $3,000 really doesn't go very far. However, it's a decent chunk where it can start to subsidize and or go towards the bigger number that you might need. And if you've got someone helping you out or someone supporting you with some expenses, etc., when you get to that $3,000, $5,000 mark, that's where, for most people, unless they're, having to replace a 6 or multiple 6-figure salary, now you're getting into, at least a decent number where even if, or especially if you're all on your own, you're the one supporting yourself, you can scrape by with the $3,000 to $5,000 depending on where you live. It might not be easy, but it depends. You can start, depending if you've got a transition fund or some money saved, you can start making a transition once you start getting more consistent income. And if you get your rates towards that, $2,000 mark for 9 sessions or so, now you're getting a few clients, $4,000, maybe an extra client, renewing. Now you can get towards that $5,000 a month mark easily, much more easily. And you're talking 2 clients. So it's not like, oh my God, I got to get 15 people enrolled in this new program I'm doing in order to just make, let's say, $3,000. And the work involved, it takes a lot more work there. So those are some of the main reasons I'm saying, hey, start off with that one-on-one. I've been doing this full time since 2004. My primary has always been one-on-one. And not only just I love it, and I love groups as well. And I have group stuff that I'm doing and that I've done. It's just I found that, wow, there's nothing better than working one-on-one with people. And, when someone hires me, it's a good chunk of change to get paid. And I get to work with that person. So it's a very sustainable business. And then I get clients that renew. And then over the course of time, once you get that flowing, you can create a good, consistent income, good 5-figure months, even multiple 5-figure months. And that just using that one-on-one model, not to mention any other products that you can have or service that you can have on the side, which can leverage that even more. And that's just, for me, I'm just a one-man band, and I get all that done, and I average 30 hours a week. So you can expand and grow from there, but I choose to stay there. I'm happy with living it, keeping it real simple systems. That's what I teach. So I'm showing you the possibilities with just that, with that one-on-one space. Of course, as you get your rates up more, that helps as well, but that comes with time. So those are some of the advantages of one-on-one. And another main reason why I'd suggest starting with the one-on-one and sticking with that is because in the beginning, even if you think you know your audience well, I'll say this, you don't. You don't. Even when I transitioned to helping coaches transition to a full-time business, call it 4 years ago now, I thought I knew my audience well, but as I started working with them and interacting with them more and had more and more clients, I started to understand more of what they were really going through and what their needs really were now. And even though I had been that person, obviously, because I had transitioned at one point too, right, to become a full-time coach, and I had known, I had my own experiences with that, and I could empathize and relate to those things. It also had been since 2004, call it 12 years after that. So there were a lot of things that I was reminded of, like, oh yeah, I remember feeling that way, and some of those things that we forget along the way. That's part of my motivation for transitioning into what I do now with you all, helping coaches transition to full-time business, is because I realized, wow, a lot of the things that I've learned along the way, and maybe I've started to take for granted or just didn't think about anymore because they were second nature, like just simple systems. And now all of a sudden, as I started teaching this to newer coaches, they're like, oh my God, this is so helpful. Thank you so much. It was like, wow, they don't know this. They're missing the structure. And obviously, the more you teach something, the more you learn as well. The more you learn how to teach it more effectively. Every time I have one of these calls, I'm working with a client, or, I just did a big course. A coaching company hired me to do a startup course for them, for their new students. So it was a fantastic privilege. And I was teaching a lot of the stuff that I teach for a startup course for them. And so as I'm going over this stuff, I was coming up with more stuff. I was actually, in the moment, I was teaching it in new, I would say, even more effective ways, because as you explain it more, as you're immersed in the same information more and more, as you talk to more and more of those people, you start to hear common threads. You start to maybe say or ask some of the same questions, or maybe even more effectively. So you hone your craft. You get better at what you do. That makes you more valuable. And so not only are you even more valuable to your clients, not to say that, 3 years ago I was less valuable mentor coach than I am today, or for yourself, if someone hired you 2 years ago, like, oh, you were less valuable, because we're as valuable as we are right now. And it doesn't mean you didn't help them back then. It just means you've refined it over time, and you just have a different approach, and that's what happens. But you do understand it better. You can teach more effectively. You become a better coach just in general, and you know what their needs are. And so in that first 2 years, what that's going to enable you to do, and what I recommend is, in that amount of time, is now you can start building your material. Meaning you're taking notes during your sessions. Not that you have to sit there rigorously typing stuff the whole time, but make some notes. When I wrote my book back in 2009, when I published my first book, that where I started that book from was, prior to that, I had 5 years of coaching clients, of sessions. And that's where I was starting off. And every session, it was like not only a breakthrough moment for my clients, but it was like a breakthrough moment for me. I remember sitting there talking, and we'd have this aha moment. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. And I'm sitting there, I'd hang up the call, or even during the call, I would just jot some notes down. And then I would just start to expand upon it afterwards. And I'm like, ooh, these are cool. They were all cool new concepts that were derived from our sessions. And I felt like it was all fresh material. It wasn't like I read a book and I'm like, ooh, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And then that's new stuff as you hear it, but it's not your information. This stuff was coming from these calls and these clients. And it was like fresh examples and fresh information. I'm like, ooh, this is good all material. And I started compiling that information. And that's where I launched my book from. I'm like, I don't know what the heck my book's about. The title of my book is Being Fulfilled. It's actually on my website, sellingcoaching.com. If you ever want to get a signed copy, I'll mail you one. But it's Being Fulfilled. But where that came from was from all my sessions. And I just bullet pointed out. I started expanding upon it. And then next thing you know, I got a 400-page book. You know what I mean? And then also I've done several audio courses. I've got an 8 CD course, a 3 CD, a 1 CD course, and all that information came from that work as I started to understand my audience better. So what I'm saying there is waiting to get into some group programs, waiting to get into, let's say, offering a course, a 4-week course, a 5-week course. Now, after you've done that for, let's call it 2 years, you've got a lot of information. You understand your audience well. So not only are you a much more effective marketer, because now you can talk to their needs, because you know what the threads are, and you know where their, if you will, their biggest challenges are, that are the most relevant. And that's important, because if you know what the most relevant is for most of the people, now you can offer, let's say, a group program or a group course on that specifically, where's the biggest, if you will, pain point, as people might say, and start there so you can get the most people enrolling in that, or most people attracted to it. And again, that's just going to make you getting people signing up for your group course a lot easier, right? So those are some of the main points of doing that one-on-one, which is going to help you, for the future. And now we go to that groups coaching side, and I'll either say group coaching or even a group program. There's just different ways of doing it. And some of my clients, like even a couple on the call today, they've done some group programs right out of the gate. They've done some one-on-one coaching. I've got quite a few clients that do some group programs as we start that off. And it's not necessarily group coaching, it's more of group programs. So group coaching is definitely more challenging to get more people, and even group programs, to get 5 people enrolled in a course. Like I said, what's your price point? $150, $200, depending on how long it's going to be, 6-week course. Again, it's a lot of work just to get, and I'm talking from a money perspective, just to get $1,000. And again, it's not bad. Any income's good income, but especially if you're trying to earn some income, it's harder to get to those numbers where you're replacing a salary or earning enough where you're contributing to a household. So with that being said, waiting till you get more numbers is better. But once you get to that point, what I'll say with group programs is this. If you can start off with a group program, I'll just say maybe a 4 to a 6 week course. I would recommend you starting there as opposed to a higher price point group coaching program. So the difference would be if I've got, let's say 5 to 10 people and they're going through a 4-week course, and it's whatever, $150. It's $97 for them to go through the course. And I'm trying to get, however many people, but maybe hopefully 5 to 10 people. And realistically, if you can get around 5 people starting off, that's probably a good number to shoot for. So if you could do that for 6 weeks, get a course going, get a specific topic, that's a great place to start. And then from there, if you want to do some group coaching, what I found that works, like for instance, what I've done is I actually started a group program probably a year and a half ago. And that was, I would say that was closing in on my 18 to 24 month mark. So I listened to myself too, just so you know. I waited till about that 18 to 24 month mark of helping coaches transition to a full-time business. And I started a program, a group coaching program, but I didn't even know really what it was. I just called it the JSL Mentoring Mastermind, and it was under the same premise of helping coaches transition to a full-time business. And it wasn't till doing that for another year and a half, and I had at the most a handful of people in it at a time. It was $99 a month. It was a private Facebook group as the back end of communication, and then it was every week on Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. And we did it on Zoom via video call. And I usually have between 2 to 5 people in the group at any one time. So, but I never really marketed it necessarily because I didn't really know what I was marketing yet. I just knew I wanted to do a group program. But then call it 6 months ago, and you guys if you've been in my audience, you might have seen my live sales conversations. So livesalesconversations.com is the domain for it. But now it's really uber defined, and it's where I help coaches convert their leads into paying clients. So you can see that's another whole headline. It's still within the premise of helping coaches transition to a full-time business. But I'm sharing this story, not to market this necessarily, but to say, so you can understand the evolution in real life, is to say, when I started this off, one of my most passionate pieces of helping coaches transition to full-time was those what I call sales conversations, meaning when you have a lead or an interested person, how do you have that conversation with them, and how do you actually convert them to a paying client? And that's probably one of the most challenging things you'll be faced with once you get everything going and out in front of people and your marketing and things like that, is how do I navigate those conversations, and how do I actually get someone to hire me? How does that actually work? So, but when I started that off, I realized no one was in that spot. All these coaches were coming to me and they didn't even know who their audience was, never mind having a conversation. So it's kind of like, ooh, I've got to kind of put that on the back burner and work with a bunch of people to kind of get them to that point. But now, of course, now that I've been doing this, 4+ years, etc., now I've got a lot more clients who are in that spot, who are getting to those leads. So that group program evolved into livesalesconversations.com, where now what we do is we're helping coaches convert their leads into paying clients, right? So the evolution of it was, but I couldn't have figured that out, even though it was all right there. I couldn't have figured that out initially. And even if I did, I wouldn't have had anyone in that program. It would have been a pain in the butt to get that, because I was attracting coaches from the startup phase. And that's where I wanted them. I wanted to get new coaches, because that's where the most value was for them. The coaches that have been doing it for a longer time. Not that I don't want to work with that person, but I've always been, even when I was in the fitness industry, I was always intrigued to that new person, that person who's coming into the gym for the first time, that's just like, oh my God, I don't know how to use this. Because that was me, right? That was me when I started working. I didn't know what to do. I remember someone showed me, oh, here's how you use this machine, or here's how you do this. And I was like, oh my God, and that just turns me on. I love that piece. And so when I do this with new coaches, I just love that they don't know, they're clueless. And I love being able to help them through that. So I was attracting those people, so I couldn't do what I wanted to do yet. But now I have that livesalesconversations.com, because now I've got more of those people there. So now, since I've transitioned that, and I've got more and more clients that are, if you will, graduating from my one-on-one mentoring, it's a perfect feed into there, because, it's not as intense, investment-wise, but it's also not as intense like one-on-one. They don't need that as much anymore, but they need the helping in these conversations, because they're having more and more of those. And so it's a group program. It's much, like $99 a month as an example. So it's dirt cheap in that sense, and you get to work and see with other coaches in the video call. So now I'm starting to see, even in the last month, I've gotten 3 or 4 new people. I got more people that are going to be coming in, but it's a natural feed-in program. And now also, I don't have to work as hard to get people in there, because I see it more of, is, if you will, a graduate program. As I work with my mentoring clients, some people will rehire me because they need more of that time, that one-on-one time. But also, if they're at that spot, they know they still want to work with me. It's a great natural progression to get them into that group. So now it's, like I said, you go into groups more, your biggest work, as I kind of alluded to earlier and mentioned, the clients that I've done that with, they'd be shaking their heads behind the scene. Like, it's a lot of freaking work to get a group together. I will tell you, it's a lot of work. And I worked with and collaborated with a lot of people who have had large audience seminar companies. When I had my seminar coaching company, and I collaborated with other seminar presenters in their seminar companies, and their companies would dwarf mine. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars in revenue, and they had 4 or 5 employees, and their audience and their email would be in the 6-figure marks, meaning hundreds of thousands of people, or at least multiple 5 figures in terms of email lists. And in order to fill events that they were doing, the reality was they had 2 to 3 full-time people filling their events all the time. And it's work. And sometimes they'd show up, and you fly across country and you'd be speaking in front of 10 people. So it's not the glamorous thing that you think it is, or easy. And now you're talking, okay, you've got a few hundred people that aren't necessarily even, relevant audience, and you're trying to do a group coaching program or a 6-week course. Like, hey, the reality is, it to a certain degree, it is a numbers game, and so that's why it's going to be really hard, or it can be really challenging for you. And that's why I'm giving this information. I just want to set you up for success, but at this point, as I shared my story there and that evolution, and that's experience. And prior to helping coaches transition to full-time business, these are the things I experienced in my business. And that's why I stayed one-on-one for so long, because and I'm a hard worker. I'm not a person who slacks off or that avoids hard work. But, I went away from groups and even setting up my own events for a while, because it was just so hard and it took so much time. And the yield on the back end was, a handful of people. And hey, not a bad thing, but I needed to get paid. If it was the same amount of work to grab 1 or 2 or 3 one-on-one coaching clients, well, then I could pull in, $6,000 or $8,000 off of whatever I was charging at that time. And now I could pay the bills. Now I could support myself and my family, and there was a big difference there. So get to yourself to that point of figuring all that out, figuring your audience out, figuring what their needs are out, as I kind of elaborate on my story there, what I've seen. And now there's going to be a natural evolution into your group program. And not only is there going to be a natural evolution, but you're going to be able to fill your numbers a little bit easier. And then also, it takes a lot of pressure off having to fill the groups, because if you've got a good one-on-one system going, you're getting paid well. So it's not like, oh my God, I need to fill this class, because not only do you want to fill the class, but hey, at the end of the day, we have financial responsibilities. You need to earn income every month. The mortgage still comes at the end of every month, and the bills and the car payments and whatever else you have going for you. So you've got to fulfill those obligations. So you can't. I always tell people, especially when they start to hire me right away, I'm like, you can't need to earn money now. That's not a good place to be in. Some people can thrive off some of that pressure, but you need to be able to just, let's get our systems going. Let's begin to work it, and let's look at that steady growth. And hey, if we get some good payoffs and some quick revenue, that's fantastic. But let's get to the point where we're going with that and get it going consistently. So those are some of the main objectives we're talking about here, and some things to consider as you're looking at one-on-one, versus the group coaching, and the timing of that for you. And I think that's the biggest thing is where's our effort put in, and then what's the payoff for it? Not just financial payoff, as I've said, but also the emotional payoff. And that's the last point I'll touch upon before I wrap this up, is to say, and you heard me say a little bit earlier, is, it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting putting people in the seats and, having these conversations with people. When I say emotionally exhausting, meaning it's energizing at the same point, but it takes time, and it takes work, and it takes, creating lists, and it's calling people, and it's finding out what their needs are, and it's nurturing relationships, and it's getting your hopes up, and then having them, be let down sometimes. So that's that emotional exhausting part. And because we've got a strong why, hopefully, because we're passionate about what we do, we take a day off, we take a weekend off, you take some time off, you recover, you rejuvenate, just like a workout, right? You get sore, and you take some time, your body recovers, you come back, you're stronger, you're fitter, you're more capable. We need to do that same thing here. And so we do it again because we have that passion, but it can be very exhausting for that. And so I want to set you up for success, and also not have to have it so that you're so exhausted every week and you get your hopes up and your expectations up so high only to have them crash down. That's why you hear me talk about qualifying people so much before you're giving out complimentary sessions, as opposed to just like, someone's breathing and they've got a heartbeat and you're like, yeah, let's do a complimentary session. And then, they just join witness protection and you never hear or see them again. And you didn't qualify them, and you're getting your hopes up, and there's no interest there because you've never asked about it, you never qualified it. You don't even know if they have a need or not. Never mind would they ever consider taking a closer look at hiring you as their coach. So we need to be cognizant of those things and of our emotional, with being and wherewithal of that buffer of how much we have. Because when I get my clients, on some of the calls, sometimes they're like, Jeff, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, it's slow. Like I said, you're zoomed in. Before I started the recording today, I'm like, you're zoomed into that business. You're doing the work each and every day. And, you might look back at your week and go, wow, I got, 15 people this week. But when you're zoomed in on it and you got a person today or a couple people, it might be a few people a week. It's a reality. A few new people on your email list. That's a good week for most people. But when you're zoomed in and you're doing all this work, it feels like, I got 2 people. Really? But let's nurture that over time, and next thing you know, it starts to exponentialize, if I can make up a word, right? The growth becomes more exponential because more and more people hear about it, and you start to experience that over time. But that's why get yourself to that 2-year mark, and that's going to be that magic window of consistency. But remember, your 2-year window doesn't begin until you're consistent week in and week out. If you do it for a couple weeks and then take a couple weeks off for whatever reason, even if it's not an intentional couple weeks off, then that doesn't start accumulating until you do it week in and week out. And yeah, you can have the vacation week, but you can't check out of your business for weeks at a time or months at a time and then just start up again and expect that to count towards your 2-month window. It's going to be a consistent 2-year window.